leaders he could win over. Whether that helped or not, it is what it is. But he kind of needed a person that was a yes person that wasn't going to say a lot, and Trump was going to lead the way. And, the intentions was you have 2 terms. So you kind of go get the job done. He wasn't expecting for the mess that happened with what happened with YouTube, Twitter, all these other Twitter files that came out, X files that came out. And then now him running, it's a different strategy on how to pick a VP. This time around to pick a VP, he can't pick somebody that's just going to be a one term, because to get the job done, in the edge, Russia and UK and some of these other places have, somebody can be in office and running for a while. Look, we don't support that. It's not the America way, but that allows for you to really inject some of the ideas that you have. So if you're a good leader, you really have plenty of ample time. You have ample time to create that momentum. But on this time around, he only has 1 term, 4 years. Okay. And his age is getting close to 80. Now he's a fired up, energized guy. So doesn't look like he's slowing down, but his VP choice has got to be different. So I know the question was asked at the beginning that they said, what Melania said, and you were very complimentary. But one, if you did get that phone call, would you entertain it? And 2, if not, do you think if you could be, unbiased in the most possible way, do you think you would make a good VP candidate? And if not, who would you think would make a good VP candidate? Because the strategy's got to be 12 years, not just 4 years.
Yeah. Well, then thank you for that question, and thank you for the nice intro. And it's good to hear from you. I don't know if I'd make a good VP candidate. I mean, probably not, actually. I mean, I've never done anything like that at all. I'm, you know, I don't think I'm crazy, just to be totally blunt with you, but I'm a little eccentric in that, and I'm definitely committed to saying what I think. And so, the structure of politics is totally foreign to me. I know I could give good speeches because I like giving speeches, but there's a lot more than giving speeches. So would I be good at that? Yeah, probably not. But it's just impossible to imagine ever being involved in politics. And I'm not being coy or anything like that. I've covered it my whole life. The number of politicians I would voluntarily have a meal with is like, fingers on a hand. I just don't like them. And so I generally think you should stick to things that come naturally to you, that you like, that you have an innate aptitude for. And in my case, it's writing and talking, but it's not kind of in like raising money or reading talking points, or I don't know. I just don't see myself doing anything like that, to be honest with you, though. I mean, who knows? God knows where this country's going.
Tucker, Charlie Kirk wanting to ask you a question.
Great.
Hey, Tucker, excited to see you this weekend at AmFest. It's going to be great.
Thank you.
Looking forward to seeing you in Phoenix. Super quick. So, Tucker, I want to get your thoughts on this. As you know, we do a lot of stuff on campuses, and I've been, for the last 11 years, trying to get wealthy donors to realize it's a bad idea to send money to these universities. And in the last 6 weeks, it seems as if that's finally having some momentum. When you were sitting down with Candace, you said, I really hate these people that have been funding the anti-white nonsense on these campuses. And I was honestly shocked, speechless, when Bill Ackman came out the other day and said in his letter, basically, I realized that I have been asleep, almost complicit with funding these universities for years, and how anti-white, anti-Western, anti-male they are. So, Tucker, you said all the rage should be against powerful people. What should we forgive people that have been funding this for the last 20 or 30 years? How do you think about this, especially as
your mic, Charlie, your mic, I think is under a shirt. Not the Tucker. Did you hear the question? I know this mic kind of cut out at the end.
Yeah, I first of all, thank you for that question, Charlie. And I mean, well, just to start at the end, we should always forgive people. As we ourselves want to be forgiven for our many faults. I mean, I really feel that way strongly, and I will always forgive somebody for anything. If the contrition is heartfelt, I mean, it's our obligation to forgive people. And the lack of forgiveness in our increasingly secular country, where our leaders worship themselves as gods, is one of the main problems that we have. So of course, I will always forgive anybody, and I would ask people to forgive me for my shortcomings. And that would include Bill Ackman, by the way, who I have mixed feelings about, but I loved reading that the other day. But my point remains, which is our principles have to be universal. And so if it's wrong to attack one group, it's wrong to attack any group. It doesn't matter what the group is or whether I'm related to them or not or know them. It doesn't matter. Attacking people on the basis of their group identity or their immutable characteristics is always wrong, period. And this country is founded on universal principles. And if it's not, then it's just, whatever. It's just Suriname. I mean, it's just like any other crappy little country run by power mad people who are transactional and have no principles and crush the weak and reward their friends. So that is the one thing that we can't give up, is the acknowledgement that these principles are universal. They apply to everybody. Second, I don't understand why nobody has made the obvious point, which is, if it is a sin to attack a foreign country, if it makes people feel unsafe or whatever, okay, then why is it okay to attack our country? I mean, people piss on the United States constantly. I personally think they should be allowed to, because I believe in free speech. I don't think you should, fire someone, or I don't know, fire, but I don't think the government should penalize somebody for attacking the United States. I don't. But the outrage disparity is really shocking to me. So you attack a foreign country, people are like, how can you do that? That's hateful. And at the same time, everyone sort of accepts as a matter of course that the entire college experience is based on attacking the United States and its institutions and its history, often very unfairly, sometimes fairly. There are definitely ways you could attack the United States, and that's fine. But to claim the whole country was built on slavery and it's the most unfair country in the world, when of course it was the most fair country in the world. That's true for all its faults. So I just would like to see a little bit more parity. If it infuriates you to see a foreign flag burned, does it bother you to see your own flag burned? If it infuriates you, if you think it's a crime, an act of violence to criticize the policies of another country, why is it not the same to criticize the policies of your own country? Can you explain that to me? Can you speak slowly as you do? Because I don't understand. And I take it personally because I'm an American and I don't have another passport and I'm not going anywhere. And my ancestors have been here for hundreds of years and I hope my descendants will be too. So I do take that personally. And I think it's gross. And to watch some of these, and by the way, I don't begrudge them if there's some, popular podcast host who's super upset about what's happening in a foreign country. That's fine with me. I'm not mad about that. But if he's applying such different standards to my country, like nothing's too crappy for the United States. Well, we should send the refugees that I'm describing as terrorists to the United States, because who cares about the United States? What we should really care about is some foreign country. I'm offended by that. And by the way, that's not an attack on the foreign country. It's not. And it's not an attack on any group of people. It's just a natural response from someone who lives here and was born here and plans to die here. I don't know why that doesn't make sense.
It does make sense. I just want to jump in and say it absolutely does make sense, and we need more people to be willing to say that. There's nothing wrong or dirty about being America first, and the people that are trying to switch the narratives and make it seem like, you know, to love your country and to want to see your country secured first is wrong, are completely, they're the ones that are wrong, and I'm saying that because, Charlie, obviously you mentioned me and the conversation that Tucker and I had, and I'm sure, Tucker, you don't pay much attention to the headlines, but people tried to make it seem as though our conversation, us wanting to be America first, was somehow wrong and backwards. And so, I'm grateful for people like you. I think whether you want to or not, you are a pioneer. And I think that people with platforms, as you said, who much is given, much is tested, are wondering, what does the future look like in media? What does the future look like for the Tucker Carlson network, for people that are willing to stand up and to say things that are plainly obvious and plainly true, and are unwilling to, be smeared out of existence? What does the future look like for people like me and Charlie Kirk? We're a generation beneath you. What do we have to do? I want to just know more about your future vision for the Tucker Carlson network, because obviously, all of us are excited about what you're doing, and we do view you, as I said earlier, as a pioneer in this space.
Well, thank you. I mean, my vision is, partly inchoate. I'm just being honest. I mean, these things evolve in ways that you can't foresee it, and this will be no different. But my baseline belief is that you have to be protected, and I know that from experience. And you can, work for people who you really like and who you think like you. And then things will happen that you don't understand, and all of a sudden you're cut off from any kind of audience, and you have no opportunity to say what you think is true. And that's happened to me before, and I don't want it to happen again. And to rely on advertising. If you're me, if you're Elon, it's fine because you're in a different category. You're the richest man in the world. But if you're me, you can't rely on just advertising. You can't, because it's a fickle world. It's a turbulent world. And you need the fortress effectively that a subscription model affords. We're going to be posting on X every single day, all of our content, and some of it will be behind a paywall, but part of all of it will be on X because we want the biggest audience we can get. And we so appreciate the amazing and at this point unique nature of this platform. But you have to have subscribers who support you and will protect you and your ability to fund this stuff. The documentaries we've got we got 20 more than 20 people working for us right now, and you can't rely on advertisers to keep that open if all of a sudden there's another January 6th or they make up something or there's a terror attack and oh gosh, we have to shut down anyone who's criticizing the government now. You think that won't happen? Of course it'll happen. I mean, it's guaranteed to happen. And I just want to stay afloat during that time. And I'm not, money driven. I never have been. I'm happy to make money, but that's not my goal in life at all. My goal in life is to say what I think is true. And I think this will allow it.
Bay?
Speaking of
Ben, are you there?
Speaking
Go
of
ahead.
saying what you believe is true, Media Matters, of course, trying to censor. There is very few people that are properly fighting back. Elon Musk is one of them. Another is the Attorney General of the state of Missouri, Andrew Bailey, who's joining the show right now and has filed now an investigation into Media Matters over the last 24 hours. Has announced that the state of Missouri will be investigating the fraud of Media Matters. Would love to give the floor to the Attorney General of the state of Missouri.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. Thank you, Tucker, for what you do to speak truth and to, consistently espouse these basic principles. And it seems to me that there are three strategic objectives in the defense of our nation right now. And we've talked about all three of them. I certainly heard a discussion about all three of them this evening. And really, the first one's the border. No border, no country. If we don't secure our southern border and we allow this mass invasion to continue, we will lose who we are as the United States of America, and it undermines the rule of law. The second strategic objective is the weaponization of government. We see that time and time again, going after President Trump and political opponents, weaponizing the criminal justice system to achieve political objectives that you can't win on the merits, and so you've got to undermine the rule of law to be able to achieve those objectives. I mean, at some point, like you pointed out, Tucker, this turns into a banana republic. And again, it's a rule of law issue. But the one I'm most concerned about tonight that I really want to focus on, and I think touches and concerns the most recent issue with Media Matters, is the right to free speech. Look, it's the battlefield of ideas that is the essence of free speech. And that's a foundational principle of our republic. It's about individual expression. And what I see time and time again today are radical progressive tyrants who want to take that freedom away from us. And they're willing to lie, cheat, and steal to do it. These are cowards who can't fight and win the battle of ideas. So again, they're going to manipulate, they're going to deceive, they're going to destroy our ability to carry on the conversation. And really, it boils down to two principles of how to motivate human behavior: inspiration or manipulation. And that's why I think this new front in the battle for freedom of speech is such an interesting juxtaposition between Elon Musk, an inspirational figure who inspires innovation, against the manipulative behavior that we see from Media Matters. And I think that again, that's a very clear moral distinction between that inspiration and that manipulation. I'm here to tell you, what I see from Media Matters are a series of lies, deceit, and manipulations. The entire organization is built on lies. The fact that we've got a radical progressive advocacy group masquerading as a media outlet is shameful, that they've been able to go this far and get away with it. And I'll tell you, as part of our investigation, we've already received documents that purport to be internal memoranda from Media Matters. And we're going to hold that as part of our internal investigation. And I'll tell you, the contents of these documents would chill the devil's spine. One of the more disturbing quotes is where Media Matters opines that a deeper grassroots bench also means that Media Matters will be better positioned to win corporate pressure campaigns. They take credit for forcing Facebook to adopt censorship by using public pressure, then working hand in hand behind the scenes to maintain censorship on Facebook. So this is a pattern of behavior that we've now seen replicated in their attack on X. And my question to you, Tucker, is, in this fight for free speech, how did we get to a point in our country where one side of the political spectrum completely rejected free, fair, and open debate?
Thank you for that, and thank you for what you're doing on this. I don't think there's much that's more important. I would say, we allowed the framing to be created by, uh, you know, the other side, and the other side lied about why they were doing it. Again, the point of censorship is to protect the people in power. Always, they're the only beneficiaries of censorship, and the rest of us kind of went along with the lie that this was being done on behalf of the weak, some oppressed group or other who needed us to be more sensitive. And it was merely that, just be more sensitive. Don't hurt anyone's feelings. Don't use the word retard. It's mean. Okay, fine. I don't need to use the word retard. I'm okay. Right? But that metastasized into what we're looking at now, which is just this massive structure, which is a kind of combination of government and private power aligned against the majority of the population in order to preserve power for a few against the many. I mean, that's just true. So I think the way to combat it is to get to who's funding it. I mean, they're not doing this on behalf of the oppressed trans community or black people or whatever they're saying they're doing is a lie. They're doing it on their own behalf. So who's paying for it? Who's paying for Media Matters? It really, I think long term, the only way to fix this and a whole lot of other problems that beset this country and make progress impossible is to end nonprofit status. The whole thing is ridiculous. I mean, the premise behind nonprofit status is that nonprofits are, quote, acting in the public interest. But that's clearly untrue. They're acting in their own interest. By the way, it's a massive tax dodge for people to, well beyond their own deaths, continue to, control the society. But more than that, it's unfair, and it totally distorts our political system completely. All this stuff's being paid for. All this stuff is possible because the people doing it don't have to pay taxes. Well, how is that fair? Like, in what world is Media Matters making America better? It's in direct opposition to the Bill of Rights. It's insane. So I think the only way to fix it is to get to the roots. Ignore all the stuff about identity politics. That's merely a cover. This is powerful people seeking to preserve their power non-democratically. And I think bringing pressure to bear on those people, exposing them, saying their names. The Soros stuff has been very effective, actually, in a sense. I mean, even when I worked at, among purported conservatives, the word would go down, don't criticize Soros because that's bigoted. And I always say that the guy's like the biggest donor in American politics, and he's an atheist. Like, how is this bigoted? And I ignored it. But many people didn't ignore it. They wouldn't criticize George Soros. Well, how did that happen? Because the attacks on George Soros rattled George Soros. So he sent out the word, get them to stop attacking me. It works when you attack people by name, when you call out what they're doing with evidence, not the low level people, not the Antifa soldiers who were, hassling people in public parks, just arrest them. The people paying for them are the ones who need to be exposed. I really believe that. And then they will knock that shit off quickly.
David, I want to go to you, David, and you and Tucker were two of the first. By the way, Benny, is a bit of an echo from your end. Just your mic is unmuted. David, I want to go to you. I'm not sure if you're going to ask about Ukraine or chat about Ukraine, but I'd love if you do. Elon did stay not too long ago in a space. We are sleepwalking into World War III, and I think people are just ignoring the war now, especially with what's happening in Gaza. You and Tucker had a great conversation about it in your interview, but would love to get your thoughts on it and Tucker's as well.
Well, Mario, I'm happy to talk about that. But first, just building on this previous conversation about censorship and weaponization of government, I just want to ask Tucker, is this, in your view, a sign of weakness or strength on the part of the ruling elite? I mean, on the one hand, it feels like it's a sign of weakness in the sense that they wouldn't need to be censoring their opponents if they were really strong. But on the other hand, it really does feel like they're just kind of cementing their total control over our discourse. And if it weren't for Elon buying Twitter, which was kind of a fluke, it would have already happened. So how do you interpret that? I mean, are the elites who are perpetrating this, do you view this as a sign of weakness or strength?
Well, thank you, David. And your podcast is unbelievable. I keep texting you this, but like the number of people who listen to it is blowing my mind. So very cool. Obviously, it's a sign of weakness. Hysteria is always a sign of weakness. It's hysteria. I mean, it comes. It's like it's a gender assigned term, and it was It was the opposite of manliness. Manly self-control was the opposite of hysteria. So, it's always a sign of someone who believes he or she is in the subordinate position. And it's true in your own life. If your kids disobey you and you get hysterical, what you're really telegraphing is, I have no control over you. And if you're in control, if you're firmly in control and have the respect of your children, then you can firmly but calmly correct them. And, that's how a man who's in charge of his house behaves. Hysteria is not. That's the single mom play. So, yes, it's a sign of weakness. The problem is they have a lot of power. They still have a lot of power. So they clearly feel existentially threatened. I mean, there's no mistaking this behavior. This is Ceausescu. I always think of this, was on tape when he and his wife, Elena, were led away to be executed in '89 in Romania. And it was videotaped. And they tell him, we're about to execute you. And he starts barking orders at the people who are about to kill him. And I thought, what an interesting response that was. He became even more insistent on his power, as it was obvious that he had none. So that's a very human response. When you feel like it's slipping away and you're about to be executed, you freak out. But what's interesting and very revealing is they're not about to be executed. I mean, we're nowhere near realigning this country to like majority rule. We're not even close to that. Like, they have all the power. But they don't know that or something. I don't know. There's some weird psychological tick here. I think it may be as simple as they know what they're doing is illegitimate. It's not consistent with the Constitution or American history or even with decency. And they feel very paranoid as a result. It's like an Edgar Allan Poe story. They can hear their own heartbeats because they know they've done wrong. I mean, I do think that's what we're seeing. The problem is that people who feel that way, who have a ton of power and feel threatened, are very, very dangerous. Very dangerous. Like, because they'll do anything to save themselves, and they can do anything. So they're freaking me out right now,
On the
Yeah,
point
and I think we just got another example of that today. Do you see that there was an FCC commissioner published a letter opposing the fact that the FCC just canceled a contract with Elon's company SpaceX, which is the only company that can really provide internet from space. And yet the FCC, just out of the blue for no reason, canceled a almost $1 billion contract. And he basically said this is because the Biden administration has declared Elon persona non grata. So yeah, just another example.
Well, you could. I mean, it kind of, if you use their reaction as a guide to what's important and what matters, which is a pretty handy guide, like what actually matters, just look at what they're doing, what they care about, because they're pretty good at figuring out what actually matters. Keeping X open as a free speech platform is, I think, the biggest deal in their world and the single biggest threat to their illegitimate rule. And so you can imagine a situation. I mean, I haven't talked to Elon about this. I'm not an intimate friend of his or anything, but you can imagine where they just bring so much pressure to bear where, it's a very expensive company. It's expensive to operate. He paid a lot for it. And you sort of wonder if there isn't a way for the public on both sides, anyone who supports free speech, to help. I mean, is there some sort of public investment vehicle where people who support free speech could become minority owners with a different class of shares of the company to help? I mean, I think that's every bit as virtuous as sending money to the March of Dimes. I do.
Yeah. Well, I think the thing that everyone could do is just upgrade to Twitter or to X Blue, the premium account. So that would be the simple thing. But
Yeah.
I mean, I think you're right. By the way, let me just say that congrats on the launch of TCN. Just speaking as a web product guy, I thought it was extremely well executed, and I was happy to subscribe. And I would urge everyone here to do the same. But I think to your point, I mean, I agree with you that these people would not be attempting censorship, which is so un-American, anathema to everything that the vast majority of Americans believe, if they weren't fundamentally weak. And yet, it feels like they're so close to cementing their control. And look, like I said, Elon is kind of a fluke. I mean, in the sense that I know lots of, really successful people in Silicon Valley. None of them would have stuck their necks out to oppose the censorship regime in the way that Elon has. Never mind, spending $45 billion to acquire Twitter. So, and to keep on suffering the penalties that he's suffering. I mean, look at what they're doing. You had this FCC decision today, just canceling this huge contract. They're investigating him for supposedly building a glass house at Tesla. I never knew that was a crime before. You know, the DOJ is investigating SpaceX for not hiring enough non-Americans, like enough refugees to
Yeah.
to to jobs that are involved in sensitive national security jobs. I mean, it's just like insane what's happening. And I'm just speaking right now as somebody who's reading the news. Okay, this is not me divulging anything I've talked to Elon about. Okay, this is just me reacting to publicly reported news stories. So Elon, I think, is really kind of a fluke in his willingness to stand up and potentially face the repercussions of opposing this censorship agenda. Never mind buying Twitter in the first place and opening up the Twitter jails and restoring free speech. So, and I guess the point I would just go back to, if that hadn't happened, which really only happened because he cares so much about free speech and he really does think it's fundamental to America and to civilization in general. I mean, we really got lucky that really and literally only one of our major, successful people in Silicon Valley had the means and the worldview to do that, that we're even speaking on this platform right now. And that's the thing that, so I agree with you. On the one hand, it's a sign of weakness that they're pushing this agenda. On the other hand, they are so close to implementing their total control over the public discourse. And it's, like I said, only a fluke that it hasn't happened already. So let me stop right there and get your reaction.
Well, I couldn't agree more, and it's hard for me because I lost my show in April, and Elon immediately encouraged me to use this platform, and it was great. It was great for me personally. I didn't make any money, but I really enjoyed it, deeply enjoyed it, and it changed my life for the better. And so I don't want to seem like I'm flacking for the guy. I think objectively, if I'd never been on the platform and I had no connection to it, I'd still feel the same way. Is without it, you can't be a democracy. You can't be a free country if there's no place for people. It's Speaker's Corner in London. We don't have anything like that except this. And I'm just not sure. And I agree with you completely that it takes a very unusual person to want to do something like this. And it takes an even more unusual person to pull it off. Not just a rich person. I mean, by the way, most rich people are cowards, as you well know, and you're one of the rare exceptions to it. People always talk about fuck you money. He's got fuck you money. There's no such thing as fuck you money. There's only fuck you poverty. A lot, you're fearful of losing it. So you're even more under control. So he is a complete fluke. There are not a lot of people like Elon in any society ever. Very few, handful, dinner party number. And so the fact that everything aligned and we have this, I just feel like, and it's just, again, it's hard for me to say because my own fortunes are tied up in this too, to some small extent, but I just can't overstate how important I think it is for every decent person in the country, regardless of background or voting history, who cares about preserving a free society. And I think on some level, everybody wants a free society. I mean, honestly, everybody demands and does anything he or she can do to keep this open and free of government control. I mean, because that if we lose this, or if we don't have no platform like this, then we kind of are done. Honestly, all the podcasts in the world will not save us, including mine.
I'd like to chime in here for a second, if you gentlemen don't mind. I believe, looking at the panel tonight, I'm the only speaker who's never lived in the United States as an adult. There's a lot of people listening who perhaps don't know who I am. Of the 55,000 people who have tuned in, I left the United States involuntarily at age 8, so I am an American citizen, but I've never lived in the United States as an adult. I live currently in Romania. I've lived in Slovakia, Poland, the United Kingdom, notably, in the Middle East. I don't think that the people listening at home, the Americans listening at home, perhaps understand how alien this concept is around the world, that not just foreigners can come into your country with all the good it's done and the hand it's extended to people for them to build a better life, and to openly criticize the country and to accuse the country of inherently being criminals for their past, how unusual that is, but also to have powerful powerful agencies, Media Matters springs to mind naturally, that are grown within the United States, staffed and manned by mainly American people, whose life mission, for whatever reason it is to demonize American society and to demonize the American people, based largely on ridiculous claims that everybody is inherently born a criminal. Now, I've lived in Romania for 7 years. Even with what's going on right now, I would never say something so stupid as to look at something in Romania's past. If anyone knows World War II history, Antonescu famously allied with Hitler during World War II and accused the average Romanian person of being a Nazi sympathizer because their great-great-great-grandfather or their great-great-grandfather, who's long since dead, has somehow passed on this genetic legacy of being an evil person. I think that if I said that to a Romanian person on the street, quite rightfully, they would punch me in the face. So, as the only non-American, I guess, here, the non-American resident, I'd like you all to know that it is absolutely insane. It is wild to people living in countries like Romania that, South Africa and England and America are literally from within its own people demonizing every single other member of that society and saying that everybody from outside of our country is good and we ourselves is bad and we owe the world X and we owe the world everything because our great-great-great-great-grandfather may have owned African-American slaves. Keeping in mind, I'm the descendant of African-American slaves myself. It is absolutely wild that this takes place, and it's absolutely unthinkable to even someone like me who left the country at 8 years old, of all the countries I've lived in. And a very, very good point was made by the Honorable Attorney General earlier, Mr. Bailey, when you said, why? Why is the southern border not secured? People argue about this. I remember people were arguing about securing the southern border. The first elections I can remember, Bill Clinton, Al Gore, when I was just a kid, this was an issue that was on the table, and it still has not been done by anyone. Romania has probably 1/6 of the GDP per capita of the United States. In terms of money and finance, it is flat broke compared to the United States. And we share a southern border with Bulgaria. And as close to zero as you can imagine, people sneak from Bulgaria into Romania every single year. Zero. And it would be nice if people in the United States, instead of hating themselves and hating the country for misdemeanors committed way before any of us existed, if they had the attitude of some of these Eastern European countries. I heard, I don't know if it was Viktor Orban of Hungary or a Polish politician. I think it was a Polish politician who said, the Polish border is more than just a line on a map. The Polish border was paid for by Polish blood, the souls of Polish men, and we will not take this issue lightly. It's just absolutely wild and unthinkable. It's a uniquely Western problem. I feel like it's American more than it is any other country. And quite frankly, people need to fucking drop it, in my opinion.
Well, you got to
It's
wonder why it's
embarrassing.
but why is it happening? I mean, and I would say I don't think it's just America. I think it's the entire Anglosphere.
Yeah, the West.
Americans are being taught to hate themselves, but the Brits already do hate themselves, but not as much as the residents of Australia and New Zealand do. And of course, no one matches Canada for masochism. So, this is a thing that's happening. It's not organic. It's on purpose. And what's the point of it? Well, the point of it is to destroy your civilization, because all of those, particularly this country, are countries without a working majority of anybody who has anything inherently in common, racially, ethnically, religiously, which is fine. I'm not arguing against that. I'm just saying, in the absence of an overwhelming majority who have something obvious in common, the only thing that binds the country together is love of country. That's all they have, is a common culture, which, by the way, begins with a common language. And the assault on English, the idea that we should print voting forms in foreign languages, or we can't, that it's, quote, racist to declare English the national language. These are not academic debates. This is our country will collapse if it becomes multilingual. Quebec can't even, exist peacefully with Western Canada. So anyway, my only point is, this is a bigger deal. I think, attacking American history, it's more than annoying. It's an attack on the ability of the country to continue, I think.
Benny? Benny, you there?
Tucker. Hey, Tucker. Charlie has a follow-up. His mic got cut off, and I'm going to throw to Charlie.
Charlie, you there? Your mic is not working, Charlie. Not sure what's happening. Whenever it works, just jump in. I want to try to press again on the Charlie until your mic works. Just jump in when it does. Tucker, David, I want to try to press on the Ukraine question. David, you know, you've been very vocal about it. More and more people are starting to pay attention. Do you think that the tide is shifting now? Do you think we'll get a peace deal soon? David, Tucker, would love both of your thoughts.
Well, no, I don't think we're going to get a peace deal, because you heard today at the press conference with Biden and Zelensky that Biden's living in some sort of fantasy land. He's still talking about Ukraine joining NATO. I mean, it's like it's totally contradictory. I mean, a few months ago, Biden was saying that Putin had already lost the war. Then a couple of days ago, when he needed Republican support to push through more Ukraine funding, he said that if we don't provide this funding, Putin's going to win the war. And now today at the press conference with Zelensky, he's saying that Ukraine's being part of NATO. So it's all totally confused. But just to connect the topic of Ukraine to the topic of censorship, I want to get Tucker's reaction to this. I mean, I personally believe that there are 500,000 people in Ukraine who are dead right now because we do not have an honest public conversation in the United States. If the mainstream media had honestly reported that there was a deal available in the first month of this war to end the war, all we had to agree was for Ukraine not to be part of NATO, which it never will be anyway, because it's not going to win this war. If the mainstream media just reported that, I think the American people would have said, of course we should sign that deal. Just, make that deal. Why would we block it? And instead we blocked it, and look at what's happened. 500,000 people are dead, and Ukraine's losing the war. They're on the back foot. The country's been completely destroyed. And I look at all of these virtue signalers on Twitter who've been enforcing this narrative, the people with the Ukraine flags on their profiles, the ones every day by the thousands who are attacking me for pointing out the truth about this thing, saying somehow I'm an agent of Putin or whatever. I think that if we had an honest conversation on social media or in the mainstream media, this never would have happened. So let me throw it to Tucker. I mean, what is your view? I feel like when you were on Fox, you were probably the only person honestly telling the story of how this war started. And I think you were just about alone in that. And if more people had told the truth about this war, where do you think we'd be today?
Well, lying has consequences. And of course, this war wouldn't be still in progress were it not for the Biden administration abetted by the leadership of the Republican Party. So, I mean, there's like a direct line between the propaganda, the lying, and the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people, an entire generation of Ukrainian men. I mean, Zelensky just said they're going to call up 40-year-olds. Well, what does that tell you? They're no more 25-year-olds. And I shouldn't chuckle because it's like horrible. And really, in the end, it abetted cruelty, because that's what we're looking at. The people who and I'm not talking about your neighbors who got wrapped up in the myth of the ghost of Kiev, or we're calling it Kiev, and had Zelensky t-shirts. They're good-hearted people who thought they're on the right side. I get it. I'm talking about the people who pushed this war, who went to the Munich Security Conference, the Vice President of the United States, the Undersecretary of State, and said to Zelensky, we want you to join NATO, knowing that was the red line of it has to be the red line for a sovereign country, period, meaning Russia. You're going to have a war if you do that. They knew that. They did it anyway. They wanted a war. And then they created, they destroyed Western Europe's economy by blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the main thing they did was destroy Ukraine, and they didn't care. I mean, that just, I don't know. I'm not an expert on war. I've seen a couple, and it means like lots of dead people who shouldn't be dead, and there's no reason for them to die. And we now know the Israelis were honest enough, as you remember, Bennett, to say over a year ago, yes, there was a peace deal in progress, and it was scuttled by the U.S. That's a massive moral crime. Like, the blood of those kids is on their hands. I think that. I don't think that's an unfair conclusion to draw from the facts. And yet they're running around lecturing us about democracy and how they're on the right side of history. The opposite is true. They've committed a horrific crime, and the main victim has been Ukraine, and they're still posing as the defenders of Ukraine. I mean, it's like mind-boggling to me. I can hardly believe it's happening.
Tucker, if I could,
Tucker, Congresswoman Paulina Luna is on. Speaking of Ukraine funding, the floor is yours, Congresswoman.
Hey guys, yeah, I just wanted to speak on that for a minute. I actually had gone to Poland and met with the Ukrainian parliament and delegation there. And part of the reason why I've been so basically vocal about not giving them any more funding and I think that everyone should know this, that what the parliament anticipates and intends is once this war is over, they actually want to take all of the equipment that we've given them and essentially start their own Wagner group. And I think that the fact is that the Republican Party as a whole, even McConnell, I mean, many people have been complicit in really just supporting the military industrial complex in this. And frankly, had Trump been in office, I think that this would have never happened. I think, frankly, that probably there would have been peace talks. And the fact is that no one wants peace talks. They just want more war talks. And that's exactly why Zelensky was in Washington today. So, to give you hope for the future, though, I do think that the more people that we can get into office that are not a part of this problem, we stand a chance at saving this country. But there really is a movement that I think is starting to take form now, and don't lose hope, because this country is worth saving.
Well,
I'll
that's
try.
hard. That's heartening to hear. Thank you, Congresswoman. I think. I mean, at some point, you think like common sense has to prevail, and of course, it's not a matter. I'm just saying really quick how ashamed I am for how mad I was about being called an agent of Putin and how defensive I was. I've never been to Russia. I mean, it's like it's not even worth it's like being called a racist. I'm not a racist. I'm not an agent of Putin. It's not even worth getting mad about it. In fact, I think the slur is designed to make you mad and designed to channel your attention and your energy into fruitless directions. Like, just laugh. That's absurd. And I wish I'd done more
Yeah.
of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Well, I know what you mean, Tucker. Just
Yeah.
I just want to underscore your point, Tucker, about the moral crime. I think it's really important to say that all the people who wanted to fight in this war on the Ukrainian side volunteered, over a year ago. And very, very sadly, the war has not gone well, and the vast majority of them are now dead or incapacitated. The people who are now being mobilized or conscripted are all people who didn't want to fight, who are literally hiding in their homes or hiding elsewhere, trying to avoid the draft. There have been an abundance of articles now, including from Western pro-Ukraine Western publications, talking about the fact that all the whatever young people are remaining in the country are in hiding. They do not want to fight, and yet the talk now is that Zelensky's going to have another wave of mobilization or conscription. They're going to round up the students. They're going to round up young women. They're going to round up the people in their 40s or older. And they're going to be fed into this meat grinder of an unwinnable war because, unfortunately, the Russians just have too big an army. I mean, should have been really clear before the war even started. The Russians' industrial production of artillery shells and other weapons of war is just far too great. It's greater than even what the West can produce. And so, what we're talking about now, if we give Ukraine another 60 billion or whatever, what we're talking about is conscripting people who do not want to fight. We're talking about rounding them up at gunpoint and sending them to the front lines. And there've been plenty of articles talking about how people are sent to the front lines with only 5 days of training, no real training. And they're being sent there and turned into cannon fodder, being destroyed by Russian artillery. I do think it is a moral crime for the United States to persist in this delusion that somehow we're going to add Ukraine to NATO by rounding up whatever is left of young Ukrainians and sending them to the front lines at gunpoint to be destroyed in this artillery war. It makes no sense to me. And then the
David, but how? Sorry to jump in. How I want to get your thoughts on how could this end? You've mentioned, and a lot of people don't want to say the taboo word of a potential World War III, and you're called a fearmonger as soon as you mention it. Is that still a concern in your opinion? And if not, what other options do you think are more likely?
Well, it's only a concern if the U.S. escalates by getting directly involved. I don't see the Russians using nuclear weapons because they're winning the war with conventional weapons. So why would they escalate in that way? The great danger actually is that faced with a crushing defeat, that the Biden administration will do something stupid and seek to get directly involved in the war. I think that's probably a low probability event. So I'm less concerned about the risk of World War III right now, but I am concerned that we're just going to keep this thing going, and more people are going to need to see die.
Tucker?
I just affirm everything David said, and it's not only true, but obviously true. What's crazy is that our media are so controlled, our news environment is so North Korean, that most Americans thought that Ukraine was going to win without, I don't know, consulting Wikipedia that would tell them that Russia has 100 million more people than Ukraine does. And it has such deeper industrial capacity that there's no comparison. And it has a real army, one of the best in the world, we now know, for all of its faults. I mean, it's not the Soviet army. It is better and it's big. So it was never going to happen. But Americans didn't know that. And that's really, it's very distressing to me, because if something that big and that obvious can be unknown to the majority of our population, what else can they pull on us? And the other thing I would say is that it's a little bit strange that the people who are advocating for more literally pointless killing have somehow seized the moral high ground from people who are calling for a reasonable peace, which will, by necessity, require accommodations. One hopes on both sides. All peace agreements do. And, some are wise and some are unwise, but that's the nature of them. It's the nature of every negotiation. But as soon as we start, and we're very good, our leaders are very good about moralizing in the crispest, most black and white terms about foreign conflicts, where one side is all good, the other side is all bad. And any accommodation is a moral crime. Once you start talking like that, you're just guaranteeing perpetual war in which other people's children will die. And so if you're doing that, you're by definition a bad person, in my view. And yet the people who question you are somehow they're the bad people. It really is upside down world on this and so many other issues. But I never get tired of being shocked by that.
On this subject,
actually,
I would like to go back to Congresswoman Paulina Luna. Will Ukraine funding go through in the House? Will the Republican majority hold firm on border funding? What will be the outcome here?
Well, I know Mike Johnson actually just recently did a speech because Zelensky was up here. So I think what's going to happen is I think that they're going to try to join the Ukraine funding with border funding. And then they'll put us in a tight spot, because there are those of us that don't want to give $1 more to Ukraine, but then also we do absolutely need to secure our own border. So I think that's where we're in the position of, but going back to what Tucker said earlier, there are so many people who have basically said that if you don't support Ukraine, that you are somehow empowering Putin, and that we are going to be, the ones responsible for Ukraine falling, when in actuality, when you go there and you see what's literally happening, and you realize that it does very much so feel like this is kind of a distraction. When you really see what they're planning, it can be very frustrating at times.
Also, I wonder, thank you, Congressman. I wonder if people have any concept of the harm this has already done to the United States. The sanctions alone, when you start seizing the personal property of residents of a country because they're residents of the country without any due process at all, without even charging them, and you seize billions of dollars of their personal property because they're, quote, oligarchs with Russian last names. I'm sure some of them are bad people. Maybe they're all bad people. But what you're telegraphing when you do that is that the rule of law doesn't apply to you. Well, if you're the holder of the world's reserve currency and you're the safe haven for the world, all rich people in the world want to invest in the United States because it's safe, because we don't just take people's shit because we don't like them. We have a process. If you start doing that, then the rest of the world's like, wait a second, you're not what I thought you were. I want to get out of dollars. I want to, for example, form a massive global coalition of nations that are not aligned, and we'll do our own thing. It's called BRICS, and it now represents most of the world's power. That's just a fact. So, we just ended American dominance in a bunch of different sectors, or began the process of ending it. And I don't even think most Americans know that. The consequences of what the Biden administration did in February of 2022 will be things that your grandchildren have to deal with. And we never even had that conversation, because it was oh, Ghost of Kiev, heroes, Zelensky, he's Churchill, shut up, Putin defender. You can't have big issues like this and no public conversation about them, or else you'll destroy yourself, and we are.
I have a few words. I have a few words to actually say on the Ukraine issue, Tucker. Sorry for interrupting you, ma'am. I apologize.
Dave-
What I will say about the war in Ukraine is I live just a few hours from the border. So although I'm not a politician, I'm not a member of Congress, I'm not as politically well connected as a lot of people on this panel. What I will say is I saw a side of this that a lot of Americans didn't see for at least a year until after Russia started its military operation. From the very first day that Russia rolled across the Ukrainian border, I myself and a few members of my team were personally on the Romania-Ukraine border just a few hours from my house, just helping out, giving shoes, clothes, coats to all the women and children coming across because it was the winter. In fact, Tucker, when you were at my house, you saw the massive stockpiles of emergency food supplies I still have because obviously I was arrested halfway through my charity efforts. When that first happened, when Ukrainians were first coming across into Romania and speaking to me, I heard a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them, and some of them saying, you know what, I just wish America had stayed out of our politics. I wish America had stayed out of our politics. I wish 2014 didn't happen. If Americans had stayed out of our politics, this wouldn't be happening. And when I voiced my opinions on the internet, and I voiced my opinions on I was still active on Instagram back then, and also on some other platforms. Americans who and people in the West, British, French, who probably couldn't point to Ukraine on a map, were telling me I was a liar, and I was literally physically on the border myself. I've lost 3 people I know in this conflict: 2 fighting with the Ukrainians, and 1 who was a young Belarusian man who was a friend of mine who was in Kiev at the time of the military operation starting, and he's vanished. So I don't think a lot of people knew what was happening in Ukraine at all until you started your show on X, Tucker, until you started telling the American people what was actually happening, until you shone all this light on it. So it's very, all I can do is, I guess, personally thank you, because the more the American public actually understand what's happening, the more they're going to stand up to funding this pointless forever war. It's not going to be a forever war because the Ukraine's running out of men very quickly, and the more lives we're going to save. So I'd first like to personally thank you for that, and I'd also like to let you know, because as I said, I'm currently closest to the border than anyone else maybe on this panel, and I've been there myself many times. I have moved a lot of orphans, women, kids to the United States, to Europe, paid for flights, hotels, etc., to facilitate refugees. Somebody who I came into contact with just a few months ago, her father is a 51-year-old man with no military experience, very little fitness experience, in fact, as a whole. He was dragged into this war and conscripted, and the first thing he did, keeping in mind how much money you have given them as Americans, was he asked her to ask me to buy him a Toyota truck for $5,000. I believe the United States, at the time of him asking, had given Ukraine over $20,000 for every single eligible soldier that it was possible to conscript within the country. And the first thing this man needed when he was dragged into the war was a loan from me to buy himself a Toyota truck. And I told the person, frankly, with a tear in my eye, that I had no intention of buying him a truck that's going to end up as his grave, because the Russians are going to destroy that Toyota truck and kill her stepfather, essentially.
Tucker, I know you've got a couple of minutes left. Can you hear me, Tucker?
I hear you perfectly. Thank you.
Yeah, I've got a final question for you, and I think one you'll enjoy answering. You saw the format with Spaces, and obviously you've been on Twitter for a few months, and you've also talked about the death of mainstream media, especially with the launch of networks like yours. So I want to get your thoughts on what Elon has built. I know you talked about it a bit earlier. And the whole structure of Spaces, how you never know who could jump in. You're talking about one topic and you have someone related to that topic just jump on, you have a discussion with them. And then your experience on X over the last few months as well. And then your plans with your network. Maybe it's a good way to wrap it up as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just go quickly. I mean, I'm a bit of a disadvantage, and I feel a little bit fraudulent talking about tech platforms when, I'm not honestly that fluent in it. And I sort of, I honestly, apart from the mail bombs, I love the Unabomber's manifesto. So that's kind of where I am on technology. I think it's really dangerous and soul destroying. So I don't know that much about it. In this case, I think it's liberating and great, but I've never been on Twitter Spaces before. Or X Spaces. I think it's incredibly cool, and I'm coming back. But again, I think what Elon has done, I see it in larger terms. Like, I think he's making democracy possible. And it's kind of funny that, a foreign born guy, I mean, I guess it's often the way it works. People should, a lot of good people, as much as I'm for closing the borders, a lot of good people show up in this country and they come here because they really believe in its promises. And some of them try to uphold those promises. And Elon's one of them. So God bless him. We're doing something, as I said at the outset, I'll just make it very quick, but we're trying to build a news company that's enduring. We're doing it on a subscription model, pretty light subscription model, really. I mean, most of the stuff you'll see at least part of it on X forever because I love the platform. But we're creating a whole bunch of stuff and hiring a bunch of people, and somebody needs to be covering all these stories that aren't covered. And the last thing I'll say, my greatest frustration with the news is not simply that it's biased, that it's serving power rather than challenging it and holding it accountable, which is its job, but that it's tedious and boring and repetitive, and that it's incurious. They're not interested in the world and what's happening. And this is an amazing time. And so the number of stories that don't get covered is totally ignored, or there's some clip here or somebody texts you, do you know this? What? And it's never even acknowledged by big news organizations, and acknowledged only, on a surface level by social media. Somebody needs to be following up on that stuff. And that's what we're going to do. And I think we can. The numbers work. It's not that expensive to do that. And of course we're going to be sued. Of course. That's how they shut you down. But we're trying to raise a pool to defend ourselves against that. And, we hope to make it through the end of this coming year, which is a pivotal time in American history. And I don't think I'm being hysterical or overstating the case at all.
Tucker, this has been an absolutely incredible Spaces. We really want to thank you so much for joining us. I suppose we can close it out by simply stating that your entire show followed you from Fox News to this endeavor, and it's really remarkable. That's unheard of in this space. There's no loyalty in corporate media. There's some of the most godless, soulless work there is, and that's remarkable. And so what you're building is as valuable as what anyone is doing here, and honestly complements what Elon is doing. It does seem that you are beloved at Fox and obviously by your audience. Greg Gutfeld continues to violate the ban on your name at Fox News. Greg Gutfeld regularly name drops you, and also most recently says, if you want to look at how bad advertisers can become, 2 words for you: Tucker Carlson. Violating, again, the blacklist of your name on Fox. So your final sign off to Greg, and your thoughts on having such a loyal staff.
Well, I love my staff, and I mean, they're always at my house, including staying there. So the line between staff and friend is definitely blurred. I'm not a big boundaries guy. So these are people I really love. I would never work with anyone I didn't trust or love, and my wife didn't feel the same way about, and she definitely does. And so, yeah, we're unusually close to everyone, and almost all of them came, and I'm really grateful for that. And in general, I pride myself on getting along really well with the people I actually know, and I pride myself as well on being hated by people who don't know me, which is fine. It doesn't bother me at all. But I think it's really important. In fact, I think the measure of a man is how the people who know him feel about him. I mean, who cares what people who don't know you think? I just don't. I never have. But it's very important to me to get along with the people in my immediate orbit. My wife, number one. My children, number two. My lifelong friends, my brother, my dad, the people who work for us and work with us. I mean, those relationships are the most important relationships in my life. And I don't trust anybody who claims to love humanity but doesn't have close and enduring relationships. And I do, and I'm proud of that. So, and as for Gutfeld, I love Gutfeld, but I better leave it there so I don't cause him problems. But I am happy to see, I don't look at cable news ratings ever. I didn't when I worked there. But someone just sent them to me today, and Gutfeld has the 2 top shows on the channel. So that's heartening. Good for him. He deserves it. He's a good guy.
Tucker, pleasure to have you. Thanks a lot for joining. Benny, Alex, thanks for making this happen. And guys, for the audience, we're going to have more spaces with other surprise guests. We're talking to a lot of world leaders scheduled over the next few weeks. But Tucker, honestly, I've been listening to your interviews preparing for this space, and I can't wait to see what's in store. I think the discussions you had, I listened to the one you had with Megan Kelly, the one you had with the All In podcast. To be honest, surprised relative to how the media is trying to paint you. So it's a pleasure to have a chat with you, and I hope you enjoyed the space as well.
I absolutely loved it. Thanks, guys. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Tucker, and thanks for everyone else that joined. Benny, Alex, good to wrap up.
Stay based.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Yep. See you guys. Thanks.